We all know Tony Stark as the man who saved the universe, the hero who made the ultimate sacrifice. But what if that sacrifice wasn't just a choice, but the inevitable conclusion to his entire life? What if the very psychological flaw that built the Iron Man suit also put it on a collision course with destruction? This is the story of how Tony Stark's greatest weapon, his own mind, was also his most fatal flaw. We're peeling back the armor to reveal the 10 layers of narcissism that engineered his rise and his tragic, unavoidable fall. Section 1. The first layer, grandiosity and inflated self-importance. To get Tony Stark, you have to start with the billboard-sized letters he uses to define himself. Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist. That isn't just a witty comeback. It's his entire mission statement. This is the first and most obvious layer of his narcissism. Pure, unfiltered grandiosity. From the moment we meet him, Tony operates from a baseline of assumed superiority. He doesn't just think he's the smartest person in the room. He's absolutely convinced of it, and he needs you to be convinced too. This isn't just confidence. It's a pathological ego. Think about his early press conferences. He doesn't answer questions. He puts on a show. He treats reporters, senators, and rivals with a theatrical condescension that's honestly insulting. His intelligence isn't just a tool. It's a weapon to assert dominance and a shield to keep everyone at arm's length. This hits its peak at the end of the first Iron Man. S.H.I.E.L.D. hands him a perfect alibi, a ticket back to a normal life. He walks to the podium, looks at the sea of cameras, and makes a choice that will define the rest of his existence. He just can't resist. He needs the credit. He needs the world to know. And with 4 simple words, "I am Iron Man," he rewrites the future of his universe. It's the ultimate act of public self-worship, a declaration that he, and he alone, is the hero. This single moment is the cornerstone of his narcissistic framework, setting the stage for every triumph and every tragedy that follows. Section 2. The second layer, the need for admiration and validation. Grandiosity is nothing without an audience. And this brings us to the second layer of Tony's narcissism, a bottomless, desperate need for admiration. The man thrives on attention, soaking up the spotlight like a plant in the sun. This isn't just a preference. It's a psychological craving. His entire life before the suit proves it. The crazy parties, the string of short-lived romances, the flashy public persona, it's all designed to get a constant stream of, "You're the best, Tony." He needs to be seen, wanted, and to be the undisputed center of every room he walks into. The Stark Expo in Iron Man 2 is basically a theme park dedicated to himself. He literally dances onto the stage, soaking in the cheers of a rock star crowd, like a modern-day P.T. Barnum, selling the spectacle of Tony Stark. This need for validation is so strong, it completely clouds his judgment. At his birthday party, thinking he's about to die from palladium poisoning, he doesn't reflect or reach out to his loved ones. Nope, he throws the most self-destructive party imaginable. A chaotic plea for any kind of attention, even if it's negative. He uses the Iron Man suit as a party trick, pushing away his closest friends, because in his mind, a world that isn't watching him isn't worth living in. This layer shows a crucial truth about narcissism. The bigger the flex on the outside, the more fragile the person is on the inside. Tony's obsession with public praise is a direct reflection of a deep-seated insecurity, a desperate attempt to prove his own worth to the world, and maybe most of all, to himself. Section 3. The third layer, a deficit of empathy. When your mind is so focused on yourself, there's not much room for anyone else. And that leads us to the third, and maybe most damaging layer of Tony's narcissism, his profound lack of empathy. Early on in his story, Tony doesn't see other people as people. He sees them as supporting characters in the movie about him. He's often clueless, and sometimes just plain dismissive of the feelings of everyone around him. Just look at his early relationship with Pepper Potts. He depends on her for literally everything, yet constantly overlooks her as a person. He forgets her birthday, brushes off her concerns, and even buys her strawberries, knowing full well she's allergic. It's not that he's actively trying to be cruel. It's a fundamental inability to put anyone's feelings before his own immediate wants. His showdown with the Senate committee highlights this perfectly. He treats the entire hearing like a joke, a stage for his witty one-liners, completely missing the legitimate concerns about a private citizen owning a weapon of mass destruction. He can't see their side of the argument because he can only see his. But let's be clear, Tony isn't a sociopath. His empathy isn't missing, it's just deeply flawed. We see real glimmers of it. The grief he feels over Yinsen's death in the cave is genuine, and it changes him. His mentorship of Peter Parker later on reveals a real capacity for fatherly affection and care. The problem is, his empathy is usually reactive. It takes something traumatic, like watching a friend die or seeing the carnage his weapons caused, to break through that narcissistic shell. For most of his early arc, his default setting is self-centered. This flaw is critical because it leads him to alienate the people who want to help him and make reckless decisions based on the assumption that he always knows best a habit that will have catastrophic results. Section 4. The fourth layer, identity confusion and the symbiosis with technology. Who is Tony Stark without the suit? It's a question that haunts him, and it uncovers the fourth layer of his narcissism, a deep-seated confusion about who he is and a symbiotic bond with his own technology. For most heroes, the costume is a tool, something they use. For Tony, the line is a lot blurrier. The suit becomes an extension of him, and sometimes a flat-out replacement for his own fragile identity. His famous line, "I am Iron Man," isn't just him stating a fact, it's a psychological fusion. He isn't Tony Stark, who wears the suit. In his mind, he is Iron Man. He proves this again in Iron Man 3, when he tells a kid he is just a mechanic. He identifies with the act of building, because technology is what makes him feel powerful and whole. This is a narcissistic defense mechanism. The suit is literal and metaphorical armor against his insecurities. Inside it, he's invincible, perfect, and in control, all the things he feels he's not when he's out of it. This is exactly why Steve Rogers' jab in the Avengers hits him so hard. Big man in a suit of armor. Take that off. What are you? Tony's defensive comeback, genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, is a panicked recitation of his constructed identity. But Steve's question pokes at his deepest fear, that without the armor, without the tech, he's nothing. This confusion between man and machine is what drives his obsessive need to constantly build and upgrade. He's not just improving the technology. He's trying to perfect himself. Each new suit is another attempt to build a better Tony Stark 1 without the flaws, the trauma, and the emptiness the armor is there to protect him from. Section 5. The fifth layer, narcissism as a defensive shield. So why did he build this massive, arrogant persona in the first place? Because it worked as a shield. The fifth layer of Tony's psyche is his use of narcissism to defend against unresolved trauma. That larger-than-life ego, the party boy lifestyle, and his sharp tongue aren't the signs of a man who loves himself too much. They're the signs of a man who's terrified of his own pain. The two biggest traumas in his life were the emotional neglect from his father, Howard Stark, and the sudden, violent death of his parents. In Iron Man 2, Tony watches old films of his dad and says, "He was cold, he was calculating. He never told me he loved me." That hole in his life, that lack of a father's approval, created a deep wound. He spends his entire life trying to overcompensate for it, chasing success and praise in a desperate attempt to finally impress a man who's no longer there. Becoming a genius was his way of trying to live up to, and even surpass, his father's legend. Then, the car crash. He carries that unresolved grief for decades. His playboy lifestyle was a textbook defense mechanism to mask the pain and vulnerability he was hiding. When he's captured in Afghanistan, all of that trauma is dialed up to 11. He's forced to confront the direct results of his life, his work, his own name on the side of the missile that nearly killed him. The guilt is crushing. So his narcissism goes into overdrive. The "I am Iron Man" declaration isn't just him being cocky. It's a way to rebrand himself. He's no longer the merchant of death. He's the hero. The armor becomes the ultimate shield, not just from physical threats, but from his own crippling guilt. Section 6. The sixth layer. Alcohol as a self-destructive coping mechanism. When that narcissistic shield starts to fail, when the jokes aren't funny enough, and the applause isn't loud enough to silence his inner demons, Tony turns to something else. This is the sixth layer, his abuse of alcohol. The famous demon in a bottle storyline from the comics is a huge part of his character. And while the MCU is a bit more subtle about it, it's definitely there as a key part of his self-destructive behavior. In the movies, alcohol is always around Tony. It's at parties, in his lab, during moments of intense stress. And when he's trying to relax, it's a tool for self-medication, a way to numb the anxiety, guilt, and trauma that his ego just can't handle. The clearest example of this is his birthday party in Iron Man 2. Believing he's about to die, he doesn't look for help. He gets drunk, dangerously drunk. He puts on the suit and becomes a menace, firing repulsor blasts inside his own house and forcing his best friend Rhodey to step in. That scene isn't just him being reckless. It's a cry for help from a man whose defenses have completely failed him. His narcissism demands that he be perfect and in control, but the poison in his veins is an undeniable reminder of his own mortality. He can't fix it. He can't control it, so he tries to drown it. This mix of narcissistic traits and substance abuse is a classic and dangerous combination. The narcissism makes him think he's above the consequences, that he can handle it. The alcohol gives him a temporary escape when he realizes he can't. It's a vicious cycle that shows just how unstable he really is. Section 7. The seventh layer. Post-traumatic stress and raw vulnerability. The Battle of New York changed everything. Flying a nuclear missile through a wormhole and seeing what was on the other side completely shattered Tony's world. This trauma brings out the seventh and most contradictory layer of his psychology, post-traumatic stress disorder. After the Avengers, the polished, untouchable narcissist is gone. He's replaced by a man haunted by what he saw. This is where his ego finally cracks wide open, revealing the raw, terrified person underneath. Iron Man 3 is basically a deep dive into Tony's broken mind. He can't sleep. He has nightmares. Just hearing the word, New York, is enough to trigger a full-blown panic attack, leaving the great Tony Stark gasping for breath, hiding in a bathroom. These aren't the actions of an egomaniac. They're the symptoms of a man whose entire sense of safety has been destroyed. His narcissism told him he was supposed to be in control, the most powerful guy in any room. But he saw gods, aliens, and the vast, cold emptiness of space. He learned he's not at the top of the food chain, and that knowledge is terrifying. His response is a frantic, obsessive attempt to get that control back. He builds suits. Dozens of them. The Iron Legion isn't a product of ego anymore. It's a product of pure fear. Each suit is a desperate attempt to build a shield thick enough to protect him from the anxiety that's eating him alive. He becomes a prisoner in his own workshop, and his obsession pushes Pepper away. This is such a critical layer, because it reframes everything we thought we knew about him. It proves that so much of the narcissistic behavior we saw before was just a performance. When faced with a trauma, his brain can't outsmart. The shield crumbles, and we finally see the scared man underneath, a man realizing that no amount of money, genius, or armor can actually keep the monsters away. Section 8. The eighth layer, a sense of entitlement and superiority. As Tony starts to deal with his trauma, his narcissism doesn't go away. It mutates. This brings us to the eighth layer, a dangerous sense of entitlement and intellectual superiority that he now applies to the entire planet. His trauma convinces him that his fear gives him a special kind of insight. He believes that only he truly understands the threats the world is facing, and therefore, only he has the right to decide how to stop them. This mindset is exactly what leads to the creation of Ultron. He doesn't bring the idea to the team for a vote. He and Bruce Banner work on it in secret, all driven by Tony's conviction that he knows best. He brushes off the completely valid concerns of Captain America and the others, his arrogance blinding him to the incredible risks. The phrase he uses is very telling. A suit of armor around the world. He's projecting his own personal need for a protective shell onto all of humanity. He feels entitled to make this choice for everyone because in his mind, his genius gives him that right. This goes beyond confidence. It's a full-blown God complex. He sees the other Avengers and the rest of the world as people who need his protection, whether they ask for it or not. He talks down to Thor, a literal god, and constantly clashes with Steve Rogers, not just over strategy, but over core beliefs. Tony believes his pragmatic, tech-focused mind is superior to Steve's morals. This sense of entitlement leads directly to one of the Avengers' biggest disasters. Ultron's creation is the ultimate consequence of Tony's narcissistic belief that his solutions are the only solutions, and that he can't possibly be wrong. Section 9. The ninth layer, fantasies of unlimited power and being the savior. Creating Ultron was more than a mistake. It was the ninth layer of Tony's narcissism made real, his fantasy of unlimited power and success. More specifically, it's the fantasy of being the ultimate savior, the one man who could solve every problem and end every war. This is a core narcissistic obsession, the desire not just to be successful, but to reach a godlike level of power that puts you above everyone else. After the trauma of New York, Tony becomes obsessed with finding an endgame. He's haunted by the vision. Wanda shows him in Age of Ultron. All of his friends, dead at his feet, with a dying Captain America whispering, "You could have saved us." That vision is his greatest fear and his deepest desire all at once. It confirms his terror of failure, but it also reinforces his central narcissistic belief that the fate of the world rests entirely on his shoulders. This is why he builds Ultron. He's not just trying to protect the world. He's trying to create a system that makes the Avengers unnecessary. He wants to win the war before it even begins, to achieve peace in our time. This is the fantasy of total control. It's a desire to force his will onto the chaos of the universe. This drive is what tears the Avengers apart in Civil War. Tony's support for the Sokovia Accords comes from the exact same impulse. If he can't control the threats himself, he'll side with a system that promises control. He believes that power has to be managed and centralized ideally by him, or someone he trusts. This relentless chase for ultimate power, this fantasy of being the world's one and only savior, is the absolute peak of his hubris. It's a flaw so deep that it takes the loss of half of all life in the universe for him to finally start to see beyond it. But does he ever truly see beyond it? Tony's entire life is a war between his ego and his heart. What do you think? Was his final sacrifice the ultimate act of redemption that finally conquered his fatal flaw? Or was it the last, self-destructive expression of his need to be the one who solves everything? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Section 10. The final layer, the evolution into a hero. This brings us to the 10th and final layer, the one that makes Tony's story a tragedy instead of just a cautionary tale. It's his evolution. While his narcissism is his fatal flaw, it isn't his final destination. His journey from Iron Man to Endgame is the slow, painful, and often incomplete process of shedding these layers and replacing them with something real. His entire arc is about learning to merge his flaws with genuine love and responsibility. The seeds for this change were planted early. His love for pepper pots is the first real crack in his self-obsession. His relationship with her forces him to consider someone else's happiness as equal to his own. It's a long and difficult road, full of mistakes, but it grounds him in a way nothing else ever could. Then comes his mentorship of Peter Parker. In Peter, Tony doesn't just see a protege. He sees a chance to be the kind of father he never had. His famous line to Peter, "If you're nothing without this suit, then you shouldn't have it," is Tony talking to himself just as much as he's talking to the kid. It's him admitting his own deepest fear, and it's a huge sign of his growth. At the beginning of Endgame, he's a broken man. He lost. His worst fears came true, and his ego is completely shattered. For the first time in his life, he finds peace not in applause or success, but in family. He has a wife and a daughter. He's finally happy. And that's what makes his final act so powerful. When the chance to fix everything comes along, he says no at first. He's terrified of losing the happiness he's finally found. But he can't let it go. That core part of his nature, the part that needs to solve the problem, the part that feels responsible, pulls him back in. His final sacrifice is the ultimate combination of his entire personality. The grandiosity, the need to be the savior, the God complex, it's all still there, but it's been transformed. It's no longer for his own ego. It's for everyone else. When he says, "I am Iron Man," for the last time, it's not a boast anymore. It's a statement of acceptance. He's accepting his role, his responsibility, and his fate. It is the narcissistic need to be the center of the universe, the man who solves the unsolvable problem, now channeled into the most selfless act imaginable. The very flaw that drove him his entire life, the 10 layers of narcissism that built the armor, also led him to the one moment where he had to become more than the armor. It was his fatal flaw, but in the end, it was also his path to redemption. And the universe will never be the same.